Elements project, I'm going to highlight or spotlight my stuff. We're going to work on this and we're going to speed paint. So make sure you guys have a fan. We're going to finish this in 1 hour. Get your soft fan brush out, the bigger the better. You're going to need your bottles, squeeze bottles. Your clear pottery cascade, PC 601, and the white cascade, PC 602, EL 150 fern, EL 101 oyster shell, and glowworm. This pack is AC 220, comes in a bottle, 6 bottles. I already have mine filled because like Krista was saying, we practice these and paint these ahead of time. So this project in stoneware has been unbelievably popular and a big hit. So this one's stoneware. We call this the Peacock technique. And so what we're going to do is in low fire, we're going to do a low fire Peacock technique. And it took a little bit to get it figured out, but this has just been so popular. We thought we would try something in the low fire domain as well. So what we're going to show you today, you are going to be using Elements glazes. They are a moving glaze. The Elements line of glaze is meant to mimic the elements of nature. So most of the names you're going to notice are not as fun as stroke and coat, but like fern, oyster shell, slate, it's more organic in the naming. You're going to look at the jar of your glaze. This is AP, mean approved product in the fired form. It's non-toxic and lead-free. Okay, so it's on your labels on there. So you're all good to go. The technique that we're going to show you today and the other combos, we made sure that we used dinnerware safe glazes. So you don't have to worry about any combinations in the element line that we would not recommend for dinnerware. We'll send you the Elements brochure, which is really handy to have on hand because it shows you which glazes are not suitable for dinnerware. It's going to have a knife and fork with the line through it, okay? So we're going to give you all kinds of resources that you can use at your convenience or show you where to find them on Mako's website. So today we're using fern. I love this. It's bright, it's fun, it's really good for the spring. But you can also take the same technique that we're going to show you and look at this with slate. It is slate and SC96 awkward. These combinations you're going to receive also with your technique sheet. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do that one, we're going to give you the information when you get the email tomorrow. This one I think is very pretty. This is Elements 151 Deep Water, and we used it with SC90 Pinka Dot. Isn't that pretty? So this technique you can do several different ways with dinnerware safe glazes. All right, kids, so you have your glazes out, you got a damp sponge, you've got your bottles because we're going to fill those up in a little bit. Get a damp sponge, wipe this bisque down, you guys. Mine especially, this is the rice bowl, is uber dusty. By law, we have to provide origin of country where it's made. So it says made in China, that will burn off. So wipe down your bisque. And we're going to start with oyster shell. So you're going to make sure you shake this bad boy up. I always recommend, especially if you are in a studio setting where a lot of people are going to be using your glaze, to pour it out onto a palette as opposed to dipping into the pot of glaze so that you don't contaminate this. All right. Get your soft fan brush. I'm going to be using the number 4 soft fan brush. If you have an 8, you're welcome to use that also. Priming my brush because again, it is natural hair, bristled hair brush. fully load this bad boy, and we're going to start in the center and follow the shape of this. So in the directions where it says going horizontally, we mean follow the shape of the brush, of the bisque, okay? We're
Can
gonna
you move your piece up? I can't see.
Oh, it would help. I'm doing it for my benefit instead of yours, wasn't I? I'm like, look what I'm doing. Thank you for saying something. All right, so follow the shape of the bisque. Reload frequently. And right now we're going to go through all those steps just on the inside of the bowl. After we finish the inside, we can go to the outside, but this allows us to hold on to it and move it and work with it. Okay, so I've got my one coat on. You can go onto the rim because we're going to do the same steps later on the outside, two coats of oyster shell. Again, we want to, oyster shell is what we're starting with, EL 101. Dry is when the shine is off the glaze. So that spot right there that looks dull is dry enough, but the rest of it is not. Get your fan going, good ladies and gentlemen, because we definitely want to move these coats along. This won't take very long because earthenware bisque is so porous that it's going to absorb into the bisque right away. So it doesn't take very long for the first coat to become dry enough to put your next coat on.
Are we just doing the inside or the outside
We're
too?
only going to work on the inside right now. That way you have the ability to handle the piece. If we did both sides, it takes longer. Also, I kind of do seminar teaching because if we did inside and outside, then I'm trapping all that moisture in the middle of this and it takes longer for it to dry. So if you were doing your own pieces, you could probably work inside and out and just be fine. But seminar teaching, I like to work all in the inside so that moisture can kind of come out a little bit and not slow the drying process. Okay, so let's go ahead, you guys. Mine is dry enough. We're going to apply a second coat. Make sure that you're laying down nice, long, flowing coats. Okay, I'm just laying down a coat of this glaze. I'm not stretching it. I'm not pulling it. If you ever hear your brush dragging, you do not have enough glaze on your brush. Okay, that means that it's dry and it's taking off just as much as you're putting on. So I'm going to put my bowl now. I have two good coats on there. It's nice and glossy and wet. I'm going to put this under the fan. Could you use jungle gems on the inside of this for a technique? I will say no, we do not recommend jungle gems in the food surface areas, okay? Jungle gems, the crystals bloom when you fire them, and those create little crazing and little crackling areas, which can trap bacteria. With low fire, since we don't put it in the dishwasher, we can't properly sanitize it. So in this case, no. Now I could put my jungle gems on the outside for something really pretty. Yeah, on the outside we could do that, but on the inside, no. Okay.
Could you do that if you put a clear glaze over it?
No, it's still going to have it. It still does what it does. I know that's a good thought. You would think, okay, I can put some clear glaze over the crystal glazes, but it's still going to have the crazing. Yes. What's your next question?
Okay, it's Deb. One more question. One more question. At one point in time, they told us the 2700 jungle gems popped differently than the CGs and that they were food safe. Is that still true or not?
Well, we used to have jungle gems and we used to have crystal light glazes. And the difference was one was leaded and one was not. And then when we got rid of all lead, all the manufacturers went non-leaded, then essentially the jungle gems and the crystal lights were the same thing. So but you might, if you look at the palette, you're going to notice that the crystal glazes and crystal lights, you had bigger crystals than the jungle gems, but essentially the formulation is the same. So now what we have is just jungle gem crystal glazes. So they all fall within the same category. Does that make sense? Did that answer?
Thank you,
your
Teddy.
question? You're welcome. Okay.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Teddy.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, kids. So while that's drying, what we're going to do is we're going to take the PC 601 and the PC 602. Oh, here we go, over here. All right, these are essentially a flux for low fire. Okay. Somebody asked the difference between dark flux. Dark flux is a stoneware product used at cone 6. These are considered more for 0.6. Okay, so low fired, we intend for these to be used with the elements glaze or moving glazes. So elements are moving glazes, crystal glazers are moving glazes. But if you try to sandwich this in between a stroke and coat, it's not going to move the stroke and coat, because stroke and coat is a very non-moving, more of a stiffer glaze, and it doesn't work together very well at all, really. Okay, so these work well and aid in the movement of the element glazes, which is what you see right here. Now the white cascade is going to introduce white into the project. The clear cascade is really going to add a little bit of a sheen, but it doesn't introduce another color. So what we're going to do is get your bottles out, my friends. And if you have the same bottle that I do, what you're going to do is take off this cap. I've had people cut this, not realizing it was a cap. These bottles come to you with no hole in it. And there's a tiny, tiny little ridge right there. If you run your finger over it, you'll really feel it. Take your scissors and cut it off right above that. Oh, crud, I wasn't in view. Okay, so right there is a little bitty ridge. You're going to take your scissors and cut this piece right above the ridge, okay? Don't cut too far down, because then you have this humongous hole and it lets way too much product out. So you'll cut that on there, and we're going to fill the bottles. So I filled it with White Cascade, your glow worm with it, which is Stroke and Coat 77. And then I put Clear Cascade in the other one. I cut all the tips first, filled my bottle, screwed the lid back on, and then I'm just keeping my lids on here until it's time. All right. So take a minute to do that. Make sure you shake these up. If they're really, really thick, stir them up. If you've had some of these for a very long time and you go to use it and it's really thick, you can add a couple of drops of water at a time and stir it up. All right, will Cascade move Stroke and Coat? No, it will not. Stroke and Coat is stiff. It's a non-moving glaze. That's how you can do intricate designs on a base, a vertical surface, and not have it move. All right, so get your little bottles ready. We're going to use these to create some design work in a few minutes. And this also bought me a little bit of time while I'm waiting for that second coat of oyster shell to dry. You're going to get your fern out next, shake it up, get it ready. I'm just going to use a second brush, because we're going to go back and forth. So instead of having to clean your brushes all up, you can just use 2 different brushes, okay? Again, normally I do not paint out of the pot. And the reason I don't do that is this is what happens. We want this brush to be nice and full, right? So you load it up, and then invariably everybody does this. They rake it across that lip. So that's why I like to paint off of a palette, so that I can really fully load my brush and keep it nice and full.
Can you tell me what the consistency of the pottery cascade is supposed to be? I know you said
Let's
tentative,
look.
it's really thick, but
Mine, well, let me see. Let me stick a brush in here. This is, it's heavier than cream. Can you see that dripping? It's
Yeah.
dripping off of there. Heavy cream is what I usually say, but this is even a little heavier than that, which I like because you want it to stand up. If it's more like pudding, then you need to add a little water. If you have distilled water, even better.
awesome, thanks.
You betcha. Let me see how this one. Yeah, see, it's dripping off my brush. It's hard to see at this angle. It's totally running off my brush, but it also has enough stiffness that it sticks to my brush. Does that make sense? So the clear cascade looks a little bit more gray, and the white cascade looks white. So if you get a little confused, but I did mark my bottles. Let me see how this, oh, look how pretty. See, it's not completely dry, but it is definitely dry enough that we can do the fern. So now what we're going to do is, again, using your soft fan brush, we're going to apply one coat of fern over the oyster shell. Loading my brush, again, going with the shape of the piece, laying down a nice, beautiful coat. And you can bring it up over the rim again, because we are going to paint the outside of this bowl the same way we're doing the inside, but this is seminar teaching right now. Plus it allows, it's so much easier to handle this and move it around when the outside is dry, instead of trying to do damp glaze to handle it. All right, trying to get this on nice and even, following the shape. If you get some drips because it's a little heavy, just make sure you smooth these out. I love this glaze. How many times do you, working with children and the parents want it to look like an adult did it? The child's 5, but that they want it to look professionally done. Elements is a really good glaze to use. Just remember though, if it has a CL label or CL as opposed to AP, CL is not for children under the age of 13. So just kind of remember that. Or refer to the handy dandy information that we're going to send you, a little elements brochure. The link to it that's on Mako's website. All right, so I'm getting some drips and runs. I could probably leave that just because I do want this glaze to move. Okay, so I'm gonna stick that under the fan and just talk to you a minute about this. Now's where we're going to get our cascade liners and stuff out, our little bottles out. I'm going to show you my notes. So what we're going to do, and it's hard to see on the ones that I painted because I put fern over it, but can you guys see how I have my design on here? What we're going to do is we're going to take the white cascade and we're going to make scallops, this right here, squeezing out a fairly thick line of scallops all the way around the inside of the bowl. So we're going to just do nice big loops, heavy coats, and this is where you're getting this white entering into here. Okay, so that is going to be the next step when you think it's dry enough, which is nice since we are not really touching it or brush stroking over it. I can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to take my liner, my bottle. I'm letting it drop down onto my piece, almost like I was icing a cake, as if I've ever iced a cake like this, decorative. But see how pretty that is? Now, if you get somebody that does this and it's so heavy and it runs, nobody's going to care because it's just going to move. And we're putting another coat of the fern over this. It just makes it an interesting design element. Now, once you guys get the hang of this, you can do 2 rows of loops, 3 rows of loops. Tim McPherson did one where he had up to 5 rows of loops on his with different colors. You can do some fun stuff. Now, just again, remember, you're going to want to use glazes that are dinnerware safe, which can be found in the Elements brochure, and we will send you that link. All right, so that's going to set up a little bit. Now, we're going to take the clear cascade, and this is why I had you go ahead and put these in the bottle ahead of time. And what we're going to do is I'm going to add on a big dot inside each loop. That tiny dot is using the glowworm. All right, so, and look at that. See how that one's really running? I don't mind. It's just going to add some visual interest. So we're going to put a good sized dot. You want it about 1/4 inch because this clear cascade is going to move in the firing. It's going to come down. It's going to be glossier, and we're going to put glowworm on top of it. It's going to move. It's going to grab my white cascade, and these are all going to blend down and come down into here. And look at how pretty that is. We have all these different colors going on. It makes it look like there's purple in there. We are not adding any purple whatsoever. It's the introduction of the clear cascade, the white cascade, and even putting in some of the glowworm. The glowworm is hard to see, but where it is right here, where it's really a lot lighter, and I'm sure it's harder to see on camera than it is in person. That's my glowworm coming down. So stinking cool, so cool. All right, you guys, if it runs too much, no worries in this design. Now, I like doing all of this on an inside of a bowl because if you do have too much running, if it really moves a lot, it's going to land in the center. It is no big deal. If you try this design on the outside, I would put an extra tile underneath it just to make sure until you know how far you can go. I would probably not go past the 1st inch, because it is going to move on you and you just don't want it coming down onto your shelf. So practice and figure out how thick and how far you can go before you let other people try it on the outside. So here's a good example. This is the same technique on the outside of a mug. You can kind of see where we've backed off a little bit. It's not real heavily applied all the way to the bottom. That's just glaze right there. And the loops stopped right about here. But when you have the clear cascade in between, the clear cascade really grabbed it, pulled it down, and there is the glowworm, this really light spot, bringing it down. Isn't that pretty? This looks like it's stoneware. It's basically mimicking stoneware or mid-range glaze. And you know, you could have done the inside of this too to make it just as pretty on the inside as out. All right, so now, and it's running, it's moving. I'm good with that. That's what I want it to. Now I'm going to come back over my clear cascade and I'm going to put a nice drip of the green glowworm. Again, if it runs, that's okay, because that's what we want this stuff to do, is move. I'm going to have a whole set of place setting of 4 by the time I'm done with this, because I've been practicing and, you know, trying different designs on it. See that? And like, it kind of looks like an egg yolk, but you can see the green over the clear over the white. It's going to run and give me a really pretty design. Now this time I want this to be drier, dry enough that I can come back and put another coat of fern over all of this. That's going to make it look like this. Okay, so when we're finished, the whole bowl is going to be the dried fern color. You can see the dimension of my loops. And even right here, I didn't get the white completely covered. It's okay because I have 2 more coats. I did miss a little bit there that I might touch up with the fern, okay? And even here, I have a heavier drip. I'm not too worried about that. That's just going to make it a little bit heavier right there. I just think this is amazing. And this would be interesting for your customers too. This bland little green bowl turns into this phenomenally pretty full spectrum project. All right, I'm going to put this back under the fan for just a little bit. It won't take very long. And
Teddy,
what?
question.
Oh, good. I was just going to say, are there any questions?
Okay, so I'm putting glowworm on top of clear cascade
Yeah.
so that the glowworm will flow.
Yes.
Glowworm doesn't flow.
Well, what you're doing is you're introducing another, yeah, glowworm by itself wouldn't really move very much, but when you put it on top of that clear cascade, which is a flux, and it's going to pull it down and give us this light little area of green. So the green is going to melt and come down with it. If we had put it just directly by itself without any cascades, it might move a little bit because it's on top of an element, which is a moving glaze, but it's not going to run like we have it running here.
Thank you.
You bet. I love your questions. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
Should we go ahead and do the outside or no?
No, we're still working on the inside. We have 1 more coat to go. I just have the fan just to make it gel up a little bit. So like right now, it's still damp enough that if I tried to put a coat over it, it's going to move. I guess if you want to, I mean, if you just, because you don't want to wait for this to dry, you could go ahead and start putting 2 coats of oyster shell on the outside. It's just harder because I need to move this bowl. Or I guess you could put it on. I just took a glaze bottle and I could start putting my oyster shell on the outside while we're waiting for the inside to firm up. Firm up, that's the word I was trying to come up with. Now, because this is earthenware, we are going to glaze the bottom of this, and then we will stilt it and fire it. So this is a good use of time, I guess. Get 2 coats of oyster shell on the outside. Oh, I'm glad you like the projects. Thank you. Catch you later, Claire. See, this is where it gets a little tricky. It's too wet for me to touch inside.
Well, Teddy, if that needs to dry, we could start my my plate and then come back to yours.
Well, it's not so much dry. I just want it firmed up,
Gotcha.
you know, because we're going to come over with, I'll go ahead and just demonstrate. Since
Okay.
it's so damp, you know, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my brush, and you guys can see I've really got this loaded up with the fern. I'm just going to lay it down over this. So I don't want to smear it. That's why I was trying. I did. See, it's so wet that I smeared it. if I had it under the fan still, I could let it firm up a little bit more. So we are going to, oh, that looks kind of cool, quite frankly. I don't know if you can see that. Oh, well, I'll just get it wet. See, I kind of smeared it. I'm gonna put this back under the fan and let it just firm up a little bit more. It won't take very long. But this is why, and what I do at seminars, I just do inside first and then outside after that. But we definitely want to do the bottom. I'm not going to right now because I don't want to set it down in the wet glaze. All right, so I have a better coat on there. All right, so I just want this to firm up a little bit. It's under my fan. All right, my friends, here you go. So my bowl is dry enough now that we can actually glaze over this with the fern. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply one coat of fern over the inside of the bowl. This is going to help soften the white cascade. White cascade is really intense. Okay, it's also going to help move the glazes just a little bit more. So I'm going to follow the shape of the bowl again. So this will be my second coat of fern. Is if you take your brush now and instead of laying the brush flat, we're going to paint like this. And I'm going to add just a little rim, a little band of color. What this does is it gives it a little bit thicker. It's going to add a little variation and depth to my piece. And you might have some ridges right now. That's okay, because when this fires and everything moves, and that's the whole point of this, is that everything is supposed to move and slide down so that we can have all those pretty colors. Now that's the inside. Okay, to finish the outside, you're going to use your soft fan brush and apply 2 coats of oyster shell, letting the shine go away between each coat. When that's dry enough, you're going to use your soft fan brush and you're going to apply 2 coats of fern over the entire outside, including the bottom. So you just need about 2 coats on the bottom of this piece. And then to give that fun visual interest, dip your soft fan brush in the fern, turn it on its side, and apply 1 heavy band around about the top inch of the outside of the bowl. That's going to make it heavier right there, and it's going to pull down a little bit more, and it just gives it visual interest. Then what you're going to do is let it dry, stilt it, and fire it to cone 06. Don't forget, you guys, make sure you post some of your beauties on the Mako Pottery Camp 2022 Facebook page.